are in the final week of the book of Matthew. We're in chapter 28. We're going to be reading verse 1 through verse 7 today. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're talking about the resurrection, which is an amazing way to end this book. After the Sabbath, at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. Okay, so we've had a special Sabbath, which was on Thursday, and now we had the regular Sabbath, which was, of course, Saturday night, or Friday night to Saturday night. Now, remember that their days start at sundown. So as soon as it is sundown, these women are rushing to the tomb because the Sabbath is over. So this is at night, but in John, when it describes it, it takes place all at night. And John describes this in, here we go, John 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the tomb had been removed from the entrance. So all of this, and you keep reading, it was still dark outside. Probably when it says, then the disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying as she went. This is in verse 10. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and when she sees the angels, but it's still nighttime, it's still dark, so she can't necessarily see, which is also why she had maybe a little harder time recognizing who Jesus was when he came up, and she thought he was the gardener because it was still dark. But Matthew talks about it being dawn of the first day of the week. So how does this make sense? Well, of course it is Sunday. For us it's Sunday because Saturday night, the day ends at sundown. So then sundown to sundown the next day, that's Sunday. So that's the first day of the week. How can you make dawn? Well, it can be, that's maybe different interpretations of the fact that was Sunday. But it was still dark. And whatever timing it was, we just know that this is after the Sabbath. This is Sunday. And their day ends at sundown. So it is dark. And then you have Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. There are several Marys that actually go in John 19:25. It talks about a few of the other women. Let's see, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. There's a lot of Marys in that one. And then you also have Salome, who was the mother of James and John. You have Susanna. You have a few others that are also present during this whole time, this event. But it's the women that are there. They're the ones who are the first ones to give testimony of the resurrection of Jesus. So we've talked about women's roles. We've talked about how that our design is to be a helper. Yet then we have the curse that ends up making it a difficult thing because we're trying to get back a position that was lost. But we're still designed in a beautiful way to be a rescuer, to bring great, powerful aid, just as the Holy Spirit does for us. So they're not looked down upon. Jesus does not look down upon women. He actually puts them in a beautiful light multiple times throughout all the Gospels. And they are used, even in the epistles, they are used as incredible points of ministry. So when you study all of it, it doesn't mean that women are not called to do ministry. It doesn't mean that women aren't to be in some leadership positions. It's just that there is that battle. And that's why it's so important what is said in Genesis, that there's going to be this desire. There's going to be this overwhelming obsession and desire. But you have to master it. When you master it and you get it under control, then you can be used the way I need you to be used. Just as in anything else, there's always going to be these temptations. But if you control those temptations and you don't let it control you, then I can use you to do my will, to do God's will. So then we continue on. There was, in verse 2, there was a violent earthquake. And we also know there was an earthquake when Jesus died. The earth shook, the rocks split, the tombs broke open. Well, here's another earthquake. For an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. Now, whether it was the angel coming down and rolling the stone that caused the earthquake, or there was an earthquake and it was just kind of all at the same time, However that happened, there was a violent earthquake, which means it shook things up. Now, you have Mary, both these Marys that are there, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, which is probably, this one may be, Jesus' aunt is also Mary. This may be the one that they were just referencing with Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons, so in verse 56. So there's probably that Mary because of the reference he's already made. So both of these are there at the site when this violent earthquake happens. And the guards fall down like dead men. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. It also sounds very similar to the way Daniel describes it. In fact, when Daniel saw an angel, he fell down and fainted as well. And then here we see the guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. So the women are actually here in the middle of this earthquake, and they're seeing this happen. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." Sometimes our depictions of what took place is not always accurate because we've just been we water it down a little bit. But the women were there during the violent earthquake, because he starts it that the women went to look at the tomb, and there was a violent earthquake. This happens after they go. So they're seeing this. They're also having this conversation with the angel, and of course the angel's having to tell them, don't be afraid, because what else would you do? You'd be afraid when there's a violent earthquake and this massive amount of light appears and just the stone is rolled back. Now, in the other gospels, it also says that the women are going to the tomb wondering, what are we going to do about this stone? How are we going to get it to be moved? Because what are they doing is going to anoint the body, because they didn't get to. So that's what they're headed to do. That's what they've been trying to get to. But for a few days there, Friday, they couldn't do anything because the guards were there now, and they were limited. It was sealed. They weren't allowed to go over there. But now this is getting to Sunday, and they're thinking, okay, they're going to remove the guard. This will be our chance to actually anoint his body like we were wanting to do. Now, here's another thing that's extremely important about the resurrection and the timing of it. So this began, first there's the Feast of First Fruits, and it begins 3 days after Passover. And it celebrates the first of the harvest that comes out of the ground. So Jesus, 1 Corinthians 15:20 actually tells us this, and let's turn there. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. Now, all of this whole section is dealing with the resurrection and the resurrection of the dead. And it's a powerful passage, so I encourage you to go ahead and just read 1 Corinthians 15 and really study it and get understanding. But he's saying that Jesus is the first fruits. Now, again, this is 3 days after Passover, which means this is the first day of the Feast of First Fruits. So Jesus, coming up out of the grave, coming up out of the ground, just as the Feast of First Fruits is all about, is that first harvest that comes out of the ground. Jesus is the first of the resurrected, glorified bodies. It's significant that he is the first of the resurrection. So when there's a resurrection of the saints at the end of time, at the end when Jesus takes away his bride, this is what he's talking about. Jesus is the first of those that would be resurrected, that would have a glorified body, that would be taken away. And a final note on this passage also is that the disciples here, okay, so you have these guards that are like dead men because of what's happened now. When the angel appears and they pass out, they are so afraid they'll pass out, just like what Daniel did. But the women did not, which is very interesting that they did not. They saw all this, but they did not. In fact, the angel spoke to them. So they had great courage, but there was something else within them that allowed them to withstand it. And maybe that's part of the makeup of being that woman. So besides all of this that has taken place, a lot of people will still try to say, well, the disciples took the body. I mean, because this is exactly what they say later in, well, we'll get there. It's in verse 14, I think. but that this story was trying to be circulated that the disciples had taken the body. But we also know that the disciples were terrified. They were so scared that they stayed locked in a room. So they would not have even attempted to try to take his body, just out of fear. So here we have the disciples that are in fear. They're, of course, is saying that then go quickly and tell his disciples, because they were not there, so they're hiding. And the angel says, he has risen from the dead. He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you. So now is the women's job to go and tell the men about the resurrection of Jesus. They are spreading the gospel. They are teaching. They are telling. They are proclaiming. They are evangelizing. This is what the women here do. So any understanding that just because of that women's struggle for that position means that they cannot speak out and teach and guide and bring understanding. No, this is exactly what the women were doing. They had to go and tell the disciples, Jesus is alive. This is what we saw. We witnessed it. And they were the ones to bring to tell the gospel of Jesus Christ and the resurrection. So very well, and even then, okay, we'll just go ahead and do this next verse because it's the same thing. It just ties right in verse 8. So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. Now we understand in John that Jesus appears to Mary, and that is, well, one of the Marys, obviously there's a lot of Marys there. And there's more of that story that we were talking about in chapter 19, 19 or 20, 20. So then in verse 19 in chapter 20, on the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. So the disciples didn't leave where they were, even though the women went and told them, because in verse 18 it says that Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. So she does go and tell them. But on the evening of the first day of the week, this means Sunday night, not Saturday night, Sunday night, they are still in fear and they're not getting out. So he tells them, I will meet you in Galilee, but they still don't go to Galilee. They stay in this locked room. And that's where we will pick up tomorrow in verse 11 and dive into a little bit more. Okay, what is going on with the guards?